At Masters Union, a lot of our conversations are about tech. We host a lot of unicorn founders, we host a lot of internet entrepreneurs. In today's podcast, we have here with us Mr. Sunjay Kapur, who's the chairman of Sona Comstar. Sona Comstar is one of India's largest automotive manufacturing companies, and they supply parts to 6 of the top 10 auto companies globally. So today, we are going to talk a lot about how the automotive industry came into India in the 1980s, how it cemented itself, and how India became a leader when it comes to automotive components, and always stayed neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder with China. We'll also talk about the latest trends in the automotive sector and what opportunities business school students can have in the traditional automotive sector, something that often gets ignored by our students. So stay tuned. This is a very special podcast. Watch till the end. Welcome to Masters Union.
Thank you.
So far, so good?
So far, so good.
So you met with some of the students upstairs.
Yes.
Any first initial thoughts?
No, I think we had a great interaction. I got some great questions. Fortunately, none of them were very difficult.
Not like the media.
Not like the media. Nobody asked me future projections,
Okay.
which is always a
So guys, remember that one question can still come.
which is a little difficult because we're listed. But yeah, it was a good interaction. We had some people from the automotive industry, so always helps.
Everyone here already knows your story. Hopefully, they've done enough research. So we would not go into the introduction and the chronology of how it all happened. But I do want to understand from your perspective how you see the auto industry in India from its inception in the 80s. When Maruti, etc. came in, when the entire supply infrastructure was created. Just traverse that history for us till today.
Okay, so when back in 87, 89, that's when the automotive industry really took shape of any shape or form. I'll go back a decade earlier when my father came back. He did a mechanical engineering PhD, came back from Michigan, set up a business in the gear space. Today we're also in the gear space, but that was a different business called Bharat Gears. At that time we were really doing build to print, doing some components, manufacturing. It was a license sort of environment, etc. And then in the late 80s, Maruti came in, and with Maruti came the opportunity of joint ventures. And
Maruti itself was a joint venture.
Suzuki was a joint venture. They brought in joint venture opportunities. So, if I go back to our own story, we identified steering system as a business because it was on a list of parts. And you looked at it and you said, okay, you know what, maybe I'll do this. And then we identified Koyo, which is today called JTech, as a joint venture partner. Koyo had a bad experience in India, and therefore they didn't want to partner with an Indian firm. My father and his colleague, the colleague is still with us. He's actually our chief technology officer. And I say that because, one of the aspects of building a good business is having people for a long period of time and being able to retain good talent for a long period of time and being loyal to people as people are loyal to you. And they went back and forth to Japan to get this technology, to get this joint venture opportunity, and were refused several times. But they kept pursuing, and eventually they got the technology. And when we built our first set of steering systems, my father went back with a royalty check and gave it to them to build that, that faith, to build that sort of credibility, if you want to call it that. So, and then the industry has evolved. I would say several companies have, looked at acquisitions. To your point, had looked at opportunities, and back in the 2000s, the early 2000s or the 2002, 2003 is when automotive companies started going out and acquiring, businesses in Europe, etc. We did an acquisition 2007, 2008 as well, and several companies have rightly invested in technology, and one of the driving forces of any business today, I feel, is technology. Whether you're in a service business or you're in a manufacturing business, whether in the automotive or, industrials or whatever business you might be in, is really technology. And when I say technology, you could be in a technology in terms of product, you could be in technology in terms of process. This in itself, the kind of school that you've set up here, it's a tech play in my view, because it's a completely different out of the box sort of thinking. So again, it's that aspect of investing in technology that we will see companies in the future really sort of survive and thrive. It's been an evolution process for a lot of companies where they've gone from joint ventures to acquiring technology and then exiting joint ventures. Some have sold to joint ventures. So, from our perspective, we've done a bit of each. I had a company called Sona Comstar where I sold my stake to the joint venture partner because I believed that they owned the technology and it was best that the business rests with them. We bought Mitsubishi Materials out of our business because we believed that we knew the technology and the business was best with us. So, we've been on both sides of the table. And then, of course, we've done an acquisition. We've done a couple of acquisitions so far. One has been Comstar, and one is a company in Serbia, which I can talk about, which have so far worked well. We did an acquisition that didn't work out too well. So, it's been an evolution process, not just for us, but we're a good example of what the industry's been through.
Got it. So it started with JVs,
Yes.
where we would, let's say, lease or borrow technology from usually Japanese partners.
Yeah, mostly Japanese.
Mostly Japanese partners. Then we eventually became self-sufficient. We started building our own technology.
Some people did. Some people still in joint ventures. So, and I said this in my earlier session, joint ventures are very restrictive from a geographical perspective. The Indian automotive industry, whilst it's the third largest industry, it's only 2% of the value. So, it doesn't sort of...
2% of the global value.
Of the global value. So, you don't want to play in just 2% of the global value. You want to play a significant role in the automotive industry. If you
So the contracts are basically that as a JV, you can only participate in India.
Mostly, you can participate in India. And then, of course, JVs give you the opportunity to build for export as well. It's not that they don't. But I'm saying when a JV is restrictive, you want to be able to learn the technology and then start doing it on your own. And that's the dilemma comes there when you start competing. But I feel JVs should have a shelf life. And at some point you need to say, okay, I'm going to get out of this joint venture because I've learned what I needed to, or I'm going to sell back to, the parent company, let them run the business, and
Got it.
you focus.
So for someone starting a manufacturing unit today, or someone starting up an automotive supply chain today, would you say that doing a JV is still sort of the best option, or can you go on your own?
Yeah, so I would say it's a different approach for different business. If you look at what's happening in the automotive industry today, and you look at the opportunities in the automotive industry, they're not limited to the traditional part manufacturing. There's connectivity, there's telematics, there's autonomous, there's software-driven opportunities, there's data analytics as an opportunity. So the whole startup ecosystem is involved in. There's a lot of startups in mobility, and not just in the services side of it, but in the product side of it as well. So I feel that there's a huge opportunity there. You may or may not need a joint venture partner there because, again, you could be an entrepreneur that's developing technology, and then your endeavor would be to eventually hook on to a large tier 1 supplier or an OEM, and get into their sort of ecosystem. If you were a tier 2 and a tier 3 supplier in the current environment, I continuously push for joint venture opportunities myself, because I'm like, look, you know what? Our supply chain is fragmented, is highly fragmented. And some amount of consolidation has to happen. If we want to go from 3 million to 4 million to 6 to 7 million vehicles in India, you need a supply chain that can keep up. And when you have a fragmented supply chain, businesses become very small. And when businesses are small, they cannot make profits. And when you cannot make profits, you cannot
Invest in R&D.
invest in R&D. Simple. So you need to look at it from that aspect. And if you're not investing in technology, then you need that joint venture, to bring that technology to you. So I feel that in the tier 2 and the tier 3 space in India, there is a lot of opportunity for joint ventures. And then there's a huge opportunity in the startup space for that disruptive technology that exists in the automotive.
So you mentioned telematics, you mentioned a bunch of other, very interesting technologies. Any companies that come to your mind that are doing a good job from India, which perhaps do not require like a huge investment upfront to begin with?
So, I feel that there are companies in the software space like KPIT, companies like that. There are companies globally like Mobileye. There are companies that are, smaller companies in India, and I can't say that there are companies that have, reached that scale.
Sure.
And again, that scale comes with a lot of opportunities as well. In India, when you're focused on India alone, unfortunately, if you're not in the two-wheeler space, that scale is not there. And that's one of our big challenges when it comes to electronics. We're importing electronics because we're not being able to build electronics at that scale. And therefore, I continuously tell the automotive industry that the automotive and electronics industry need to come together to work together to build that kind of scale so that we can, localize.
Interesting. And do you see, like fintech from India, now we're exporting to the world. UPI has its own story.
Yeah.
It's a case study in of itself. Do you see that happening in auto sector as well, where India becomes a net exporter?
Yeah.
Not just of parts, but also of technology and IP?
Yeah. So last year, 2 years ago, we were a net exporter in the component industry.
Right.
We had a $200 million surplus. In the last year, we were almost even. I'd say there may be a $50 million deficit with import and export. However, can India become a hub for global manufacturing? Yes. I'm of the opinion that we can if we invest in technology. I think the China plus one or the India plus one, whatever you want to call it, is playing out really well for us in the automotive industry, because everybody that I speak with is very clear that additional capacity should be put in India because of they don't want to have dependence on China for whatever reason. And I feel that if we invest in technology, if our industry continuously invests in technology, this can be a big play for us. And I feel that we should aim to become a global hub. Just to give you some data points, last year we grew 33% in terms of revenue. The automotive industry went from 57 to 76 or $75 billion.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
And had they come down during COVID?
They did. So our top was about 50 in the 50s. We came down during COVID to the 40s and 30s. We went back up to 57 and then we went to 75, with 30% of it was export. This year, in the first 6 months, we've already done a 15% increase, or 13
over last year.
13 to 15% over last year. Exports remain 30%.
Is there any other industry that's growing this fast?
I'm not certain.
I wouldn't say that about a lot of, including software.
Software has had a little bit of a slowdown for some reasons, but again, we're growing because of the opportunities that are presenting themselves in terms of China plus one. I don't think the automotive industry is growing at that pace.
The global automotive is not.
The component industry in India is growing.
Got it. And is that because the Indian industry has been more nimble and to someone's question, been more open to adopting or adapting to the EV world?
So, the fact is that the EV volumes are outside of India.
Correct.
Right? And therefore, the export opportunity becomes so important, or the ability to invest in technology becomes so much more important. Because when you want to supply to EV, or when you put capacity for EV, you need volumes. And for volumes, you need to go outside of India, because that's really where the volume is, other than the two-wheeler space and the three-wheeler space. And to the question of two-wheeler and three-wheeler, I feel that space is rapidly moving to EV. I'd say majority of three-wheelers today are EV. And 80% of all new three-wheelers are EV. And that's happening in the two-wheeler space as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So we'll just switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about your company.
Right.
You spoke about the story and how you started with the JV, now focused a lot more on technology, building IP. Tell us, these kind of companies are sort of like black boxes for us, right? From the outside. We don't know exactly what are the things that you manufacture, who are your clients, what does it look like from the inside? Give us that view.
So, we have continuously invested in technology so that we can go up the value chain. So we started as a pure play component manufacturer of bevel gears. And what does a bevel gear do? So let me, for non-automotive or non-enthusiasts of vehicles, a bevel gear is something that allows your wheels to turn at different speeds. So when you turn, right, you want your outer wheel to turn faster than your inner wheel, right? Otherwise, you'll be gliding. So the bevel gear sits in a differential, and the differential, has the application in very simple terms of moving the wheels at different speeds. A four-wheeler will have two differentials. A two-wheeler will have front-wheel drive will have two differentials, and a back-wheel drive will have one differential. What we did was the bevel gear. We have a capacity of about almost 50 million gears today.
1 year.
So we control close to 10% of the global market.
wow.
of Beverly Hills. So we do
Of all cars that are manufactured.
of all vehicles that
Of
are
all
manufactured. Yeah.
So 10% of all global vehicles have your bevel
Yeah.
gear.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So close to 10%.
That's a.
Yeah.
See, none of us knew that.
Yeah. So and so we supply to passenger car, we supply to commercial vehicle, we supply to off-highway, and off-highway is categorized by.
Does F1 use your gears?
No, not no. The volumes are too small. We supply to off-highway, which is farm equipment and construction equipment, and then we supply motors to electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers. We do active suspension motors. So we have a active suspension motor which actually changes the ride handling based on the curvature of the road. So the controller will pick up the curvature of the road by way of radar or sensor, talk to the motors and change the ride handling. So you can actually sort of have a smoother ride. We do traction motors, which goes into electric vehicles. And then we do starter motors, which is a very traditional ICE business. Also, only 10% of our business is dependent on the combustion engine.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
which means that we're a company that can supply into EV and ICE. However, our dependency on combustion engine is only 10%. So, that's again something that we've done by design because we've continuously, evolved in technology. So, whilst I can't talk about, customers specifically because for reasons of confidentiality, we supply to almost all the major OEMs around the world, whether they be in the ICE space, in electric, and we have different OEMs that we supply to in both, multiple OEMs. 30% of our revenue comes from EVs. Order pipeline, which is public information, shows that we'll go almost to 75 to 80% of supply to EV. And that's also the way the industry is trending.
Very interesting. And so, are you allowed to talk about who your favorite client and your least favorite client is?
No.
You don't
I'm
have
not
to
allowed to talk about my clients. So nobody's my least favorite client. I love all our customers.
All right. Is there anyone who? Okay, let's not talk in terms of client names, but maybe like clients from this part of the world are more.
Yeah. So I got asked this question. It's funny that you asked me, but I'd say that in the automotive industry, because of the nature of the industry and the nature of the supply chain, we have a symbiotic relationship. It's not a transactional relationship in that sense. I would definitely credit the Indian OEMs for our growth story because, that's when, we set up a shop, we had our joint venture in place. They took that leap of faith in allowing us to move from build to print to black box design. So, I'm grateful for the opportunities we got. I'd have to say that some of our customers that took a leap of faith, when we were not differential manufacturers and gave us the opportunity to manufacture differentials, I'm grateful for that because today, we're a differential manufacturer, which we were not back in 2015. So it's been a short journey, but it's been a rewarding journey from that aspect.
But these are probably all of your contracts are multi-$100 million contracts or multi-million-dollar contracts over a long period of time, right? How does sales work in a setup like this where they're so symbiotic,
Look, sales it's a function of technology. Okay. So what happens is my customer would come to me and say, this is my end requirement. With several customers, I'm a single source, okay, which is also a little unique. But I'm also very efficient we're very efficient in what we do. Let's say the customer comes to us and says, here's my end requirement. This is what I require. This is the space you have. And we build the product. So we may build a differential for customer A, which is as big as this because that's a space requirement. And for customer B, which is a similar customer with a similar kind of output, could be this big. So again, it's all about the design aspect of it. And to give you again information on that, we spend close to 3.5 to 5% of revenue on R&D.
Okay.
Our industry average is 0.5%. But we're putting money behind R&D because that's really the cutting edge, or that's really the definition or the defining difference between us and somebody else. And that's where you build credibility and you build faith, and when you're willing to do that for the customer.
And so So you said the customer comes up with the requirement first, and they probably give the requirement to, let's say, 3 or 4 different suppliers, is my guess.
Yeah.
And then do you have to compete for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very competitive industry. And with some customers, which again I can't name, we've licensed our design to them.
Okay.
So literally we've said, here's the design. So what's happened over a period of time is that customers have understood what they're good at and what their suppliers are good at. And they've allowed their suppliers to be good at what they do and just go out and source that product as opposed to building that product in-house. And by virtue of that, suppliers have invested more. And when the EV revolution began, a lot of OEMs were focused on ICE, and the engine was what sold the vehicle. At that point in time, several customers were very dependent on tier 1 suppliers for EV solutions.
Sure.
Now, some of that has changed, some of that has remained. We've been able to invest heavily in R&D, and therefore we've been able to supply to the customer parts that they want or we feel that would benefit the vehicle. So we're really at that stage in the industry.
Got it. Understood. So a 2-part question. With the Sona story, what is the one thing that you're most proud of, that you believe that you've done it better than everybody else in the industry? And then one thing that keeps you awake at night?
So what keeps you awake at night is 2027, 2028. What happens then? What do we do? So we are, working actively on building that plan now.
What changes then?
Yeah. Sorry?
What changes in 2027?
I think what happens is that, we would have done a lot of this product, right? And now we need to continuously look at growth opportunities. So we're growing at 30%. You can't grow at 30%, forever unless you continuously change what you're doing. So, things like that keep me up at night. And I think what I'm proud of is the fact that we have invested in R&D and allowed people to fail in our organization. I think the difference between companies that allow people to fail and don't, see. You see great things come out of those companies because we've gone ahead and invested in technologies which haven't hit the market.
Sure.
We may have lost money in that, but we had a great learning from it. My proudest thing about our business is that our investment goes into equipment when it comes to R&D and testing. Okay, we don't have a head office. We don't believe in that concept. We have 5 people that are what I would call head office. My CEO, my CTO, our CFO, CEO, CFO, CTO.
I mean, I believe they also sit in the factory.
Everyone sits in the factory.
Everyone sits in the factory.
We don't have a head office culture because, we believe our money should be invested in equipment because that's really making us money. Sitting in a head office is not making us any money, So it's really, that's what's making us money. And that's why, we're extremely frugal as an organization and we want to continuously invest in technology. And, I'm proud of the fact that, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we invested 6% of revenue in R&D. So, it was like, that's really what we should be doing.
But as a public company, do you get pressure not to do that?
No, because it shows great results. So I'll come to the point that somebody made about product, and I'll say it now. What allows us to build a strong business and a profitable business is a better product. Right? And what allows us to build a better product is R&D. And I'll take the example straight out of the page out of the book of Apple, right? Apple can price its product better because it's designed better. Our product has a lot of R&D and we price it better. The way we make more money is because our product is priced higher.
It's priced higher, you're frugal.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact is that and we take that money and invest it back in R&D.
Got it.
And that's really our whole aim is to continuously keep investing so that we're staying ahead.
So you're trying not to do the cookie cutter mass market, just get it out of the line. Okay, understood. So, on that point, in the two-wheeler space, we are seeing Ather and Ola. We have some Indian brands coming up, right, who own much of the supply chain. China, I think most of the vehicles sold in China are now Chinese vehicles, right? Chinese brands and manufactured in China. In India, most of our four-wheelers today still are largely foreign brands. Do you see like a Tesla of India coming in anytime soon? Or do you think there's a market for that?
So I think there is definitely a market for more I'd say for our Indian brands to expand, and we're seeing that happen with Mahindra and Tata. I would argue whether Maruti is an Indian brand or a Japanese brand because the majority of their sales are in India. I feel that even in the two-wheeler space, we're seeing these Indian startups that are, and I will point out that it's not easy to make a vehicle. It's not easy. Everybody wants to sort of build an EV. I get, a dozen proposals a day about people, wanting to build EVs, investments for EVs, whether it be the two-wheeler space, three-wheeler, or passenger car. I see a lot of proposals every day, but I don't think it's easy to build a vehicle. I feel that our Indian OEMs are doing a great job in terms of, going EV. I feel that all the two-wheeler manufacturers, the local two-wheeler manufacturers are also doing a great job in terms of, the kind of investments they're making to build Indian brands. And I think, India has a great future when you look at companies like that.
But where would that come? Where would say Mahindra and Tata, I mean, they were conglomerates before. And, when they got into four-wheelers, do you see is it even possible for a young entrepreneur to dream to build his or her own EV company?
I mean, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. I mean, I won't say that nothing is impossible. Like I said, I've met entrepreneurs that have sort of aspired to build supercars, in EV supercars. In fact, I'm in touch with one of them who's, trying to build a supercar, an EV supercar. It's not an easy task, right? It's not an easy task building a vehicle. I know that there have been vehicles built globally, and people talk about Tesla and Lucid and VinFast and all these companies, but it requires a lot. And I'm not saying it's impossible. It's definitely, if someone has the will and the determination and deep pockets, you can do it.
All right. And then let's compare China and India for a bit, right? What is it that they did right in the 90s, 2000s that allowed them to be where they are today? Where did we miss the bus as a country? And what do we have to change now?
I think it's about technology. I keep going back to this point that, if we don't invest in tech, we will miss this opportunity of China plus one. I think they invested in technology. The technology is good.
What would be the average investment that a Chinese company makes in R&D?
I would say in automotive, an average spend would be north of 3%.
In China. And India is
globally.
Globally, and India is 0.5.
It's 0.5, yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, that is the difference. There's a huge difference in terms of that. I also feel scale. China's been able to build scale. However, we are today sitting in a position where we are increasingly growing. And we're going to see more growth than what, China is seeing. And I'm hoping that kind of growth carries us through, to the 3 trillion to 7 trillion to the 30 trillion that we're talking about in 2047. So I'm hoping that we continue to, and we can only do that if across the board we invest in technology.
And what does investing in technology mean? At the ground level, what does it translate into in terms of action steps? Does it mean hiring more scientists to come up with new product lines?
So I think it's the ability to innovate, right? And to build that innovation, that culture. I mean, we have a lot of innovation in India. We call it jugaad, right? There is a lot of innovation, but how do you formalize that in an organizational setting? I mean, I'll give you an example of what you've done here. It's an innovative business model. Now, can we replicate this? Is it a repeatable business model? Of course it is. Now, if I were to go out and say, let's put this in every city in India, it's phenomenal. And you need entrepreneurs like yourself who are doing things like this that can, continuously improve. And now, you put, 1,200 students or whatever through the system, and these guys are obviously going to be phenomenal people that come out, whether they become entrepreneurs or they go into organizations and fuel the economy and build on what they've learned. So I think models like this in every aspect is what I would call innovation.
Got it.
And technology. How do you turn it around on its head for growth, for the sake of growth?
Let's say in the case of Masters Union, it was interesting for us that, we could innovate on the curriculum. We could go out to the students and say, hey, listen, this is something we have put together. Are you interested? But in your case, since the demand comes from the customer, I mean, aren't you dependent on them for innovation? First, they have to build an innovative car or a product, and then they say, okay,
To some degree we are. However, we have the opportunity to provide them a solution. If I look at different kinds of differentials, electronic locking differential, different kinds, I have the opportunity to provide them that opportunity.
So they'll tell you that this is the space, and this is the solution that we need.
There are two things that are driving demand. One is customers, and second is regulation. Okay, and regulation does play an important role in our industry. It plays a role in your industry. You may, decide to do things in a different way, or not. So we are driven. Our demand is driven by regulation and by customer demand, and then we have the opportunity or the ability to, innovate our product the way we want to, so that to give the customer the best solution. Give you an example. We have bought a company in Serbia. We didn't talk about this. That is a sensor company that sensors through millimeter wave radar. It can detect a baby's heart rate and breathing rate. Now, why does it do that? Because a level 5 safety standard in Europe requires you to alert the driver if there's a baby left in the vehicle alone and the vehicle is locked, right? Because it could die. The baby could die. Mother, runs into the ATM, or father runs into the grocery store, whatever. Boom, you've locked all the windows, and you don't want that to happen. So a level 5 safety standard requires you to alert. Now, it's a 10-second alert. Our sensor does it in 7 seconds. That's a company we bought in Serbia. Now, how else can we use this application? I can put it in this room to tell me how many heartbeats there are, and therefore focus the electricity, the lighting, the air conditioning, etc., in a certain way. So you build a smart building. I can put it in an elevator to determine whether there's a live heartbeat or not. So now this sensor is giving you different. The application is used in different forms. It can be used in automotive, can be used in industrial, can be used in any sort of thing. Right?
Understood.
Now, if you want to tell, is it a human, a petite person or a baby, you can even determine that by the breathing and the heart rate. You can even tell if it's an animal, because even animal you have to detect, right? It can even read under the seat, like the baby's now, God forbid, fallen under the seat, right? It can read through material. And it's non-invasive because it's not a camera. So again, these are innovative technologies.
That was going to be my question. Why don't you just use a camera?
Yeah.
But it's privacy. Okay.
So, these are innovative solutions that, companies like us, we would invest in to say, okay, what happens next? Now, I may put it in a supercar for a guy having a midlife crisis. He doesn't have a heart attack. You know what I mean? While he's driving too fast. So it's up to me to how I want to position the product and create that must-have. Because a lot of these products are great to have. They may not be a must-have. How do I create the must-have? And that's really up to us as a business to do.
Very interesting. This was a great example. So on that note, I'll open it up to the audience. I'm sure. Yeah. All right. Already. Go ahead.
Hello, sir. I'm Prathmeet. Thanks for coming to our campus. I have a couple of questions.
And talk about your background also. You come from...
It's the second question.
Okay.
You obviously mentioned about few of the IPs, correct? So what are the IPs you currently have across your component ecosystem that your competitors don't have? And do we see Sona Comstar getting into other part of the R&D as well, like for energy and other part of the ecosystem of the EV space?
We are not playing in the ecosystem. We are sort of component manufacturers, and we'll continue to supply into automotive and mobility as a whole, right? We continue to develop, technology, whether it's, registered IP or not. We'll continue to develop technology because, again, technology gives us that edge and gives us that ability to enter a customer and to create stickiness with the customer. So we'll continue to play in the mobility space. I can't say whether we'll get into, infrastructure or not, but as of now, we'll continue to be in the mobility space.
And coming to the second question, which is obviously has been bothering me for quite some time. 2-3 days to be precise. You recently got your PLI scheme from GRC, correct?
Yeah.
But you have ICAT next door. Why didn't you select ICAT as the partner?
GRC selected us and did the. We did go to ICAT, and we went to ICAT. We went to ARAI,
So you'll have to tell us what these.
So they're agencies that do the testing and accreditation, and we went with GRC from Chennai. But we've got other PLIs also, so I'm sure we'll sort of.
You were an ICAI.
Yeah,
Yeah, he used to work in ICAI.
Okay, we'll have this offline discussion.
I can help you with that.
Since it's bothering you, we'll discuss it offline.
Go ahead.
Hi. You talk a lot about differentials, and I just want to give you a moment to actually talk about that way more. So, limited slip differentials are very commonly used for drifting, right, in cars and stuff. But India mein modding scene is not that great. Like, it's illegal and all that stuff. My question is two-part of one. Do you think if we have components that are specifically made and government licensed, okay, this can be used with these cars as well? Do you think that would actually encourage modding culture? Like, as in, will that actually encourage the legalization of modding culture? And
What
secondly,
culture?
modding, cars modification,
Okay.
right? Because if people want to go drifting, they want to have a limited slip differential rather than a standard differential, which is going to be, yeah. So number one, and number two, what kind of what's the demand difference that you see in limited slip differentials in India versus outside? Because India made it's just not allowed.
Yeah. So your second question, if it's not allowed, there is no demand.
No, but like
So look, a lot of this is also governed by regulations. I said that, right? And it's also governed by what the customer wants. So we can present a solution to the customer, right? The customer at the end of the day has to pick that solution, right? So our job is really to tell the customer that these are the multiple options from what you can pick, depending on price, depending on packaging, depending on regulations. And then the customer picks that. There is a huge difference between the Indian automotive industry and the global automotive industry. And even you can see that in terms of value. In the West or the Far East, you could have different options, right? Like you're talking about, you can have a different differential for a different vehicle, for a different purpose. Here, it's pretty much a standard product today, right? Because again, it's a value-conscious market. It's a value-driven market for the mass market. And that's really how we need to look at this market. And that's why I feel that companies need to look at the global opportunity if they really want to design cutting-edge stuff.
all right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a little different questions than auto. So basically, you told that your growth story started after 2015, and it's been tremendously growing since then. And you came with your IPO in 2021. So how has the company and your life changed pre-IPO and post-IPO?
It's become much harder now. So pre-IPO and post-IPO, good question. So I'll talk a little bit about my personal journey. My father passed away in 2015, and we had a lot of things to look after because there were a lot of parts of our business that weren't in the best shape, but he did leave behind a very strong foundation for us, to grow on. So the foundation was strong, but again, we had certain parts of the business that needed fixing, and I spent most of my time, doing that between 2015 and the next 2 or 3 years. We then brought Blackstone into the business as a private equity investor in 2019. And when we brought Blackstone in, I moved my role from manager to owner, right? And I myself became an owner of the business, a shareholder of the business. And we employed a professional management in the business. Business is managed professionally. Everyone in the business is, or 100 people in the business are on stock options. So they have a sense of ownership as well. And, from IPO, it's really about compliances, etc. Fortunately, the business I ran before this, Sona Comstar, was also listed. So we had that culture and that mindset of running a business with the right compliances. So it wasn't very difficult for us to transition when we IPO'd. However, the kind of reporting structures and the kind of pressure you have when you're listed is very different from, when you're a private company. But, it comes with its pluses and minuses.
Good question. Go ahead.
On your website, there was this image, this map, basically global map, and there were three kinds of categories, like your manufacturing plants, your R&D centers, and engineering capability centers. So I had two questions. One is, how is a engineering capability center different from an R&D center, and all of the engineering capability centers were in Serbia for some reason. So I wanted to understand why only in Serbia as a location.
So I would say that a majority of our software engineers are in Serbia, because again, that's a sensor division. But we do have engineering capability, if that's what they're defining engineering capability as, in Chennai as well, because we have software engineers in Chennai. I said to you earlier, we had 120 software engineers in our company now, today, which is, which wasn't the case 2 years ago, because again, automotive industry, software engineer is not a common thing. So I would imagine that those engineering capability centers are trying to define software engineers and software capabilities.
Got it. Understood. Thanks.
We'll have the website checked.
That way.
So my question is mostly around your international expansion. Why did you make the decision to expand internationally? And what are some of the challenges that come with it? How did you overcome them?
We reached a saturation point in India where we supply 100% to trucks and tractors and 70% to passenger car. And then where does the growth come from? And the big volume really is outside of India. When you look at a 20 million vehicle population in North America, why would you not want to be there? So, our aspiration, of course, when we look at ourselves as a company and when we benchmark ourselves as a company, we benchmark on a global basis. We don't want to say, we have 70% or 100% of India. We want to be, what are we in terms of globally?
So that's 100% of Indian trucks and tractors
have our gears.
100%.
Yeah.
There's no competition there then.
Yeah.
So you spoke about demand, the other thing which was
Customers.
customer
Driven.
Yeah. So given the fact that India is a highly regulated space for the automotive industry, a lot of innovation gets stifled because of that, especially when we compare it to Europe and America, which has seen like all the innovation has happened there. So given the future projections of the automotive industry in our country, how do you see that these things should sort of break down? What is it that as an industry we are supposed to do such that the next innovation of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 decades comes from India? Because obviously the automotive industry itself is going through a big churn. And the second question that happens to be is that although we are seeing a rise of EVs today in the country and all over the world, we also have a competitor in the hydrogen space. All right. What is it according to you? What is it that is going to eventually triumph? Which one of them is eventually going to triumph? And at the same time, how is it that your own company will have to pivot according to, because obviously although there will be several common parts, but there will always be different parts for hydrogen, ICs, and then of course the EVs. So these two different questions.
Okay. I think the first part, in terms of regulation, I think there are regulations for safety, etc. However, there's no real I don't think regulations curb innovation. Okay, I don't think that because you have certain regulations. In fact, if I say our regulations go electric, you're going to encourage innovation. So it's completely the opposite of that. So regulations don't necessarily need to be looked at as a negative. I think if you look at even safety regulations, I think if I tell you that there's a safety regulation to detect a baby in baby's heart rate, that's an innovation that you need to come up with to meet that regulation. So I think that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is hydrogen. Okay. Now, I feel personally hydrogen in commercial vehicles is a viable option. I don't feel in passenger cars it's a viable option. I may be absolutely wrong. I feel we're at a very nascent stage where we will develop alternate fuel solutions and we will develop EV solutions. I feel we're going down a path where electric vehicles will become very popular. Once charging infrastructure gets built, you come over range anxiety, I feel that electrification is the way to go, especially for pass car and two-wheeler and three-wheelers and electric buses. I feel that I can't put my money on any one technology. However, we are equipped to supply to different technologies as a business. In fact, only 10% of our revenue is dependent on combustion engine, which gives us a comfort level of being able to supply to any kind of solution. I'm reading a lot about plug-in hybrids, and I said this earlier. I said, when we leave our home with 100% on our mobile phones, and by 3 o'clock you're sitting on 25%, you're already anxious about your mobile phone. So you can imagine what happens in a vehicle. So once charging infrastructure gets built, and that's another opportunity in the automotive industry, is the ecosystem that somebody sort of pointed out to earlier in terms of, are we going to play in that ecosystem? That's another sort of opportunity, within the automotive industry. So I don't know which solution will prevail, but from what I'm seeing and what I've seen so far, I'm a strong believer that electric vehicles will be BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, will be the way to go. Do we need to, do a lot more development when it comes to batteries? Yes, of course, because today you're dependent on one country alone, for lithium ion, etc. So is there an opportunity in the circular economy, as well? There's a huge opportunity there. So I'm actually now, working with think tanks to look at what we can do for manufacturing competitiveness, because that's really the area that we need to sort of understand better and focus on and be able to supply into any technology that comes about. We've got to be agnostic to that, as businesses, because again, regulation driven, customer demand driven, driven by supply chains. Again, supply chains will also be determinant of what happens next in terms of what technology. If suddenly someone says, I don't want to buy batteries anymore from China, then you're looking at a completely different solution. So I think manufacturing competitiveness is what we need to build, and we need to build agnostic solutions.
So just a follow-up question on that. I was listening to Sir Ashwini Vaishnav speak, and we got this sense that already in the semiconductor space, we are lagging by close to a decade, and it will take us almost a decade to come up. However, in the EV space, I think again that is what is going to happen. So my question happens to be, what is it that we as an industry and us future entrepreneurs, what is it that we must look forward to so that the next great innovation, whether that will lead up to making a Tesla or not, should come from India, such that the North American monopoly or the European monopoly on this entire industry as a whole shifts, and we are the incubation center for the world of engineers, of automotive engineers and all that. And we are already very behind because the entire industry in our country is a little, obviously it lacks that.
Couple of points to this, one is the semiconductor issue, right? Today, the automotive industry as a whole, when we went into the pandemic, was procuring 7% of the output. Today, we're probably at 15% and we'll go to 20%. So there's a great opportunity in the semiconductor space. In fact,
20% of semiconductor is used in automotive.
Will be used.
Oh, and currently it's 15%.
It was 7%, it's probably around 15% today.
Oh, okay.
Right? And to give you another example, in our facility in Serbia, we have a semiconductor design facility in the company in Serbia. Right? And there's a lot of semiconductor design happening in India. Today, I'm in touch with several companies, several large organizations that are looking at semiconductor chip design, and then fabs will happen, etc. Now, from an EV perspective, right, just because OEMs may be lagging, it doesn't mean that component manufacturers cannot invest in technology and supply to the world. So there isn't a monopoly in supplies. There isn't a company in North America that does electric vehicles or ICE that is saying, I won't buy from India. So if you have the ability to innovate and you have the ability to have a technology and to productionize that technology, then you have the world as your market. And if you look at the whole startup ecosystem, right, that's another area where there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, we work with companies from around the world, when it comes to startups. And there are some technologies get productionized, some don't. However, the opportunity exists. And, we need to look at it from that perspective in terms of, how can you, if you want to be an entrepreneur that wants to supply into the global OEM supply, into the global OEMs, you can, even from India. We do it. I mean, 85% of my revenue comes from outside of India, because I have the ability to do that.
Right. All right, we can take one last question. Go ahead.
Sanjay sir, as per my understanding and as per a data point, currently in India there are 26 four-wheelers per 1,000 of population.
and in US it is approximately 400. So the cities in Europe as well as in US, their city centers are not allowing the vehicles to come inside the center. Since you spoke of Serbia, and I had been to Belgrade, and their city center does not allow the vehicles to enter. Since we see the same thing happening in Connaught Place.
ICE or EVs also?
EVs also. We already observed that they allow cycles to move around, and in this context, since we will be approximately 167 crore by 2040, and with the speed that we are already seeing that the employment opportunities are here. So don't you think that this will further increase the pollution, and this would further destroy the environment of our country?
If we
Increase of these vehicles, because the
and therefore
number of
we're
vehicles
working
are
on-
very less.
Therefore, we're working on solutions for carbon neutrality. And therefore, while India has a goal of 2070 to be carbon neutral, companies are working on goals that are much sooner, much closer. 2030, 2035, 2040, whatever, to be carbon neutral from a manufacturing perspective. And therefore, we're working on alternate fuels, we're working on EV, etc., just for this reason, so that we don't have, more pollution, and we're not faced with more pollution.
Okay, thank you.
But are we 24 cars per thousand?
26.
That's very good. We were 7 cars per thousand when I started working in the
Okay,
automotive.
so
So
already 4 times.
definitely we're growing. So
Population is also
it's a
grown. We are
it's a
number one
positive
nation in
sign.
the world now.
That 1,000 number is not changing, right? So, so
One final question. We both are from the same high school,
yes.
right? We both went to the Doon School. Very fortunate to get that opportunity. So, what do you attribute to Doon School in terms of your success, your growth? Where do you think some of the things can be traced back to?
So I think the biggest advantage of Doon School was when you came into the doors, you left your identity outside that door and you built your own identity in school. I didn't know who was whose son, or where they came from, what their background was, because we slept in the same beds, same.
If you
kind of
call them beds.
Yeah, whatever you call them. We wore the same shoes, the same uniform. You didn't have a school bag. You didn't have, anything that came from outside the school. So you built your own identity based on who you were. And I think that opportunity to be independent, that opportunity to be equal, I think is something that, took us all, and you included, very far in life, because it gives you that exposure to, and Doon School has an all-round education, which is phenomenal, because you're forced to play sports, and you're forced to go to class, like in any school. But I think.
So now that you're on the board of governors, right, and now you're steering the school for the next, hopefully, century, how do you think about the changes that the school has to make?
So I think one of the big things that we need to focus is not on what to learn, but how to learn. I think how to learn is so important, because what kids are learning is changing all the time. And how do you equip the kids in school on how to learn? I think also, in terms of, the creating what we call the Doon School curriculum, and we've got different pillars, that define the Doon School curriculum, and that's something that, we're focusing on building an overall and all-round education.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today and being so open and candid.